It's the eve of South Korea's presidential election. The two leading candidates wrap up campaigning both in the heart of Seoul. The daily virus tally remains above 200,000 here in the nation, while the number of severely ill patients exceeded 1,000. Authorities provide reassurance the situation is manageable. The nation's eastern coastal region saw wildfires for days. The blaze is extinguished in certain areas, but is still spreading. Well, it's good to have you with us. I'm Daniel Che. Let's begin with our top story. South Korea continues to report more than 200,000 new COVID-19 cases. As for the daily tally in Seoul, the figures reached 70,000 for the first time. Those who are severely ill was above 1,000. But authorities say the situation is still manageable. Choi Min-jung starts us off.
South Korea on Tuesday reported 202,721 new COVID-19 cases, remaining above the 200,000 mark for the fifth day in a row. This is down from Monday, but still a large increase from the previous week. The number of severely ill patients is into 4 digits, climbing by 52 to reach 1,007 severely ill patients, surpassing the 1,000 mark for the first time in 64 days. There were 186 more deaths, bringing the death toll close to 9,300. Authorities are expecting the death toll to continue to soar for 2 to 4 weeks after the Omicron wave hits its peak. Given the current virus situation, the country's overall COVID-19 risk was bumped up to very high over the past week, the highest level in the 5-tier evaluation scheme. Despite the growing concerns, however, authorities are assuring the public that they still have things under control.
We want to emphasize once more that our current medical capacity can sufficiently handle around 2,000 patients in serious or critical condition. We also want to add that it's possible to raise that figure to 2,500 patients if we can make more efficient use of our existing hospital beds.
In a move to ensure safety for pregnant women with COVID-19, the government has decided to compensate hospitals that are delivering the babies. This is to allow pregnant women with COVID-19 to give birth in the hospitals they usually go to, as several women in labor were faced with difficulties in recent days due to the lack of access to facilities. Meanwhile, next Monday, authorities are set to announce inoculation plans for children aged 5 to 11. Last week, infections among children in this age group stood close to 32,000, a 10-fold increase compared to a month ago. In the capital, only 66% of schools are holding in-person classes, as more than 27,000 students and teachers have been infected over the past week. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
Wildfires have been burning across South Korea's eastern coastal regions for 5 days now. Successful containment is reported in certain areas, but fires are still spreading in others. Yi Xiu has the latest.
Today, thousands of firefighters and troops succeeded in extinguishing major fires in the cities of Gangneung, Donghae, and Yeongwon-gun County. In the city of Samcheok, 80% of fires have been put out. But as wind speed is expected to be fast at 10 meters per second tomorrow morning, efforts will be taken to put out the last bit of the fire and prevent reignition. As for Uljin-gun County, 65% of fires were put out today as 82 helicopters and 4,400 firefighters and troops were deployed. But the wind carried the fire to even more areas this afternoon. One of those areas was the Kumgangsong Forest Reserve, home to more than 80,000 pine trees. The total damaged area from the fire now amounts to 22,000 hectares, up around 6,000 hectares from the day before yesterday. This is more than around 1/3 of the area of Seoul. While there have been no casualties so far, thousands had to flee their homes and around 400 people are currently staying in temporary shelters. About 570 homes and storage facilities have been damaged as well, leaving many devastated.
I gave my best to build this farm, investing 150 million Korean won, but the amount of support from the government will be very limited.
There are also concerns of COVID-19 potentially spreading in the temporary shelter as people are staying in close proximity with one another. Meanwhile, the government has taken further steps to provide aid to the region. President Moon designated 2 more cities, Gangneung and Donghae, as special disaster zones today. The administration had already designated the Ulsan and Samcheok regions as special disaster zones on Sunday. The residents of the selected regions will be able to get some financial support, such as recovery costs and tax deferrals. 이시후, Arirang News.
The North Korean patrol boat came into South Korean waters briefly. It retreated after Seoul's Navy fired warning shots. The vessel crossed the maritime border while chasing another North Korean boat that crossed the NLL first. Bae Eun-ji has the details.
At about 9:30 a.m. on Tuesday, a North Korean boat crossed the northern limit line, a maritime boundary that separates the two Koreas. It crossed the border in waters about 10 kilometers east of South Korea's Paekryong Island. 15 minutes later, a North Korean patrol vessel that was chasing that boat also came into South Korean waters. Seoul's Joint Chiefs of Staff told reporters Tuesday that the South Korean Navy fired warning shots from a 40mm naval gun. It also sent warning messages 4 times before the patrol boat retreated back to the north 7 minutes after it entered South Korean waters. This is the first time that a North Korean patrol boat has crossed the maritime border since 2018. As for the other boat that crossed the border first, the South Korean military towed the ship near Paekryong Island to conduct further investigations. There were 7 people on board, all of them unarmed, and 6 of them wearing military uniforms. Although it's unclear why they crossed the northern limit line, those on board reportedly said that they accidentally veered into South Korean waters and have no intention of defecting to the south. Seoul's military also said that it is closely monitoring the situation in North Korea to be ready for any changes to the situation. Bae Eun-ji, Arirang News.
North Korea could be preparing to start testing nuclear weapons again at a site the regime dismantled a few years ago. Pyongyang has been launching missiles this year repeatedly, but those actions have not yet resulted in a statement or resolution by the UNSC. Yoon Suk-yeol provides a deeper analysis.
A U.S. expert says there are signs of construction work being carried out at North Korea's nuclear test site in Punggye-ri for the first time since the dismantlement in 2018, possibly signaling a resumption of nuclear tests. Imagery shows signs of construction of a new building as well as repair work on another. That's according to East Asia Non-Proliferation Program Director Jeffrey Lewis at the Middlebury Institute on Monday. Seoul's foreign ministry says it is closely monitoring North Korea's nuclear and missile movements with Washington.
Our government expresses deep regrets over North Korea continuing with its nuclear and missile activities. We urge North Korea to stop these countermeasures against peace and stability on the Korean Peninsula and in the region, and respond to calls for dialogue by the international community.
The UN's nuclear watchdog has spotted signs of activity at North Korea's main Yongbyon nuclear complex, as well as at other facilities. Regarding this, Seoul's Unification Ministry on Tuesday urged for North Korea to comply with the spirit of what it had previously agreed to in terms of denuclearization with the international community and South Korea. Following North Korea's other missile test over the weekend, the UN Security Council again failed to reach a substantive outcome on Monday due to objections from China and Russia. Following the closed-door meeting, the U.S. ambassador to the UN urged members of the Council to speak with one voice.
The Council has a responsibility to speak publicly about clear and repeated violations of Security Council resolutions. We call on all Council members to speak with one voice in condemning these dangerous and unlawful acts.
The statement was backed by 10 other ambassadors, including countries not on the Security Council, such as Australia and Japan. Seoul's ambassador to the UN, Cho Hyun, also endorsed the statement. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
The war in Ukraine deepened on Tuesday, the 13th day of Russia's invasion, with forces intensifying their shelling. It's taking a heavy toll on the lives of civilians. They desperately need to evacuate to safety. Our Kim Ji-yeon is standing by on the line for us. Ji-yeon, Ukraine reportedly rejected Moscow's offer to create humanitarian corridors. Can you tell us more about this?
Sure, Daniel. The corridors that you've just mentioned that would allow civilians to flee heavily bombed cities following a temporary ceasefire are reportedly open now, allowing civilians from Ukrainian cities of Sumy and Irpin to leave through these corridors. Earlier, the Ukrainian side had turned down Russia's offer to these corridors before a third round of peace talks were held between the two countries on Monday. And Kyiv's main reason is upon realization that most of the supposedly safe routes offered by the Kremlin led directly to Russia or its ally, Belarus. And Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky dismissed allegations that he had fled the country, reaffirming Tuesday that he's holding ground, staying in Kyiv via a telegram video which was taken at his presidential office.
I stay here in Kyiv, on Bankova, not hiding, and I am not afraid of anyone, as long as it's needed to win this war, our national war.
The UK Speaker of the House of Commons has announced that President Zelensky is slated to address British members of Parliament Tuesday, 5 p.m. GMT via video link.
The devastation so far is unthinkable. The safety of civilians should be one of the most important factors to consider.
That's right, Daniel. According to the United Nations, more than 2 million refugees have fled Ukraine to neighboring countries like Poland. Poland says 100 people have been crossing into its country every minute, in which it says it's reaching breaking point in accepting these refugees, some of them fleeing the war on foot. You can see families with children in strollers clutching stuffed toys, young mothers with babies in their arms, and the elderly moving, as fast as they can. And Irpin is one of the cities in which families had tried to flee from heavy Russian shelling and airstrikes. Witnesses say they felt the death of a city as somber silence masked the urgency, shock, and panic of those fleeing from the unthinkable violence that has shook ordinary people's lives and their livelihoods. Some are still trapped in these cities under siege from Russian forces.
There was heavy shelling. They fired at houses, people. A woman and a 13-year-old child died. All houses were shelled. A few people left here. It is hard and scary. It is a war. It is fascism. It is genocide against the whole Ukraine. Glory to Ukraine.
These heavy toll on civilians is pressuring the United States and NATO to do more to curb brutal violence. According to The Hill, the U.S. maintains a stance of rejecting implementing a no-fly zone over Ukraine, which essentially means it would be able to shoot down Russian aircraft in Ukrainian airspace. And this move would counter the U.S.'s top priority in this conflict, which is, according to State Secretary Anthony Blinken in an interview with NBC on Sunday, is for the U.S. to evade direct military confrontation with Russian forces. At a press conference in Latvia held earlier today, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg acknowledged there were credible reports that Russian forces were targeting civilians in Ukraine, which is considered as war crimes. Back to you.
All right, thank you for those updates, Jian. Moving on, President Joe Biden thanked his South Korean counterpart for imposing sanctions on Russia. The U.S. commander-in-chief believes Seoul's restrictions send a strong message and acknowledges the sovereignty of Ukraine. Ji-young shares with us his remarks.
South Korean President Moon Jae-in received a letter of appreciation on Tuesday from U.S. President Joe Biden. Biden thanked South Korea for imposing exports restrictions and financial sanctions on Russia. In the letter, Biden said that Seoul's determined measures would be a strong message supporting the sovereignty of Ukraine. He added that the country's release of strategic oil reserves will help stabilize the global energy market and praised South Korea's leadership in helping to secure world order. This comes following the inclusion of South Korea in Moscow's list of unfriendly countries. The government of the Russian Federation approved on Monday a list of foreign states and territories taking unfriendly actions against it. 48 countries, including the U.S., Britain, the EU, Australia, Japan, Canada, and Ukraine, are also in the list. All have joined or imposed sanctions against Moscow following its invasion of Ukraine. Moscow is expected to impose sanctions on the states included in the list. The Russian government explained that this list was created along with a decree signed by President Vladimir Putin on Saturday, saying that Russian companies will be allowed to pay foreign creditors from countries that engage in hostile activities in rubles. This decree was to create a way to avoid defaults while capital controls remain in place. Due to Russia's list and the decree, many South Korean companies are expected to suffer. There are around 40 South Korean conglomerates located in Russia, including the tech giant Samsung Electronics, which has the largest share of the smartphone and TV markets in Russia. Economy and finance officials from South Korea, Russia, and 5 other countries agreed to cooperate in responding to the economic uncertainties coming from the Russia-Ukraine crisis. First Vice Minister of Economy and Finance Lee Yeok-won on Tuesday met virtually with officials from the U.S., Russia, Britain, Belgium, Germany, and UAE. Lee called on the Russian authorities to support local companies located in Russia so that they can properly receive the South Korean government's support and agreed to closely monitor the economic situation. 엄지영, 아리랑 뉴스.
South Koreans will elect a new president on Wednesday. Apparently, a lot of enthusiasm with record turnout in early voting. Polling stations will open from 6 a.m. on election day itself. And for those self-isolating or contracted COVID-19, it's from 6 p.m. until 7:30. Kim Yoon-suk explains further.
6 a.m. Wednesday, the official election day for the 20th presidential race kicks off. 14,464 polling stations are opening up nationwide for more than 44 million eligible voters. Regular voters can vote until 6 p.m., while voters who are self-isolating or have COVID-19 can vote from 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. Several things to take note of before Election Day. ID is essential. Voters must bring a driver's license, passport, or ID card to cast a ballot. Also, no taking selfies or pictures of the ballots while inside the polling booths. These acts are against the election law, and offenders can be sentenced to up to 2 years in prison or fined up to 4 million Korean won, roughly $3,200 US. But luckily, taking a picture outside the polling station and posting it on social media is allowed. Taking a picture while indicating a candidate number with your fingers or taking one in front of a campaign poster is also allowed as long as it's taken outside of the polling station. When marking the ballot, voters must make sure to stamp within the lines and to mark the right candidate because they won't be given a new ballot even if they make a mistake. Ballots which don't clearly show which candidate has been chosen, or ballots voting for one of the candidates who has resigned, will be regarded as invalid. As for voters with COVID-19 or those who are isolating, they will be informed of the safety guidelines by a series of texts from health officials. These voters are allowed to leave their isolation quarters after 5:50 p.m. and only to vote. This time, they are to put their ballots straight into the official ballot box after voting rather than in a separate container like they were supposed to do in last weekend's early voting. The voter turnout in early voting last weekend has already reached almost 37%, the highest ever seen during early voting. Kim Yoon-suk, Arirang News.
The candidates are holding their final rallies. For more on how the final day went, we have our campaign teams out on location. First, the ruling Democrat Party's nominee. Let's connect to our Kim Do-yeon at the campaign site. Do-yeon, where was the latest rally and how is Lee Jae-myung wrapping things up?
Daniel, I'm out here at Cheonggye Square near Gwanghwamun in central Seoul, where Lee Jae-myung made his final rally speech a few moments ago. He says he chose this particular place because this was where the candlelight protests were held 5 years ago when millions of citizens came here demanding then-President Park Geun-hye to step down, which Lee Jae-myung says restored democracy in South Korea. He also says it was then when the citizens made Lee Jae-myung into a politician with a national spotlight on him, leading to where he is now. Joining him then was his colleagues and the citizens that have voiced support for him throughout the past 251 days since he announced his run for this election. As for his last day, he went around rallying in the capital region trying to convince those who are yet to vote and are still undecided. Before that, he started off with a message at the national headquarters of the party. Take a listen to what he had to say as a final message.
Dear citizens, it's a tight and desperate election until the end. Many are doing all they can right now. Thank you very much. I will repay all of you with a victory.
And now we also hear we would like to know what the main messages he wanted to deliver were to voters in the past 22 days. Doyeon?
Daniel, as we just heard from his speech, is seeing this as a close race that needs all-out efforts until the end to take the victory. Now, according to the campaign, he's held around 80 rallies over the past 22 days, and in total, he gave nearly 42 hours of speeches. The message has been centered on the candidate himself and his capacity as a politician, which he says is proven through his past accomplishments as a mayor and a governor. He called himself the president of economy, and that he's the candidate with the ability to revive the country's economy, which right now, like everywhere else in the world, has been hit by the COVID-19 pandemic. He put forth something called the 555 pledge. Take a listen.
We can be in the 5 biggest economies in the world, break the 5,000 points mark in the markets, and surpass $50,000 for GDP, depending on how the president and politics do things.
He also says he will reform politics once he's elected to create a coalition government which allows a multi-party system instead of the current two-party system. As for the latest, he's now on his way to Hongdae to walk the streets and meet the young generation here to use his final hours of the campaign period in a bid to get as much votes as possible from the young generation. Daniel?
All right, thank you for the report, Doyeon. Meanwhile, Yoon Suk-yeol of the PPP just held a finale to his rally right in front of Seoul City Hall. We go live to our Lee Kyung-eun, who has been following him on the campaign trail. Kyung-eun, do fill us in.
Hi, Daniel. The finale ended less than an hour ago. It was another joint rally with anchors of the People's Party, which is to highlight the united front they formed with the merger of their campaigns. There you made one last call for a change of government to achieve the key values he's been promoting, fairness and common sense. Seoul City Hall in particular is significant to PPP since its victory in last year's Seoul mayoral by-election. Perhaps the party is aiming to recreate the change of government. In fact, this is also the same neighborhood where Yoon kicked off his campaign. And throughout the day, Yoon echoed the message from his first day that he is the president the people are calling for. Take a listen.
It's the people that called on me and who gave me the chance to run in this election. I don't owe anything to any political force. What I owe is only to the people.
Yoon also hit some of the places he visited on day one, including the conservative stronghold of Daegu, to encourage people to vote after the region showed one of the lowest turnouts in early voting. Yoon is currently on his way to his final stop of the day, Gangnam-gu district, a popular hangout for young people.
So it does all come down to the final few hours. What's the atmosphere like among the party officials?
Well, the party seems to be pretty confident so far. The party chairman Lee Jun-suk said he's expecting a gap in Yoon's favor of up to 10 percentage points. And campaign chief Kwon Young-tae echoed that optimism, citing polls are conducting on their own. Their confidence lies in the fact that a majority of South Koreans support a change of government. Yoon Suk-yeol has been targeting that very sentiment throughout his campaign, saying that a change of government means not just victory for his party, but for justice that reaches people of all backgrounds.
The people are the owners of the nation. The national interest must be the priority. Being honest with the people and eliminating corruption. That's democracy.
A recent survey shows that throughout his campaign, Yoon mentioned the words Democratic Party nearly 1,000 times and corruption some 500 times in an effort to link the two together and unite people against the DP. The party believes key to winning at this point will be how many of their supporters actually come out to vote. Yoon already voted himself during early voting and will be watching exit poll results along with party officials tomorrow. Daniel?
All right, big thank you to our teams out there. It's a long day for Wednesday. Hope they get some well-deserved rest. Moving on, President Moon Jae-in asked his aides to get ready to work with the incoming administration on diplomatic and security issues. He emphasized the importance of working together to proactively manage risks and challenges in a number of fields, including security, economy, and energy, and to lead the way in preparing for the future. The Liberal leader also called on the people to demonstrate their collective wisdom by taking active part in the election. Moon asked authorities to ensure the rights of those voting under the COVID-19 guidelines are upheld and to be prepared for every possible scenario.
For presidential election day tomorrow, temperatures will be warmer than the seasonal norms. Daytime highs in Seoul will be hiking up to 15 degrees, which is about 5 degrees warmer than the seasonal norms. The mild conditions will trigger more dust particles to flow in from overseas. Expect dust levels to stand in the bad category tomorrow. In the meantime, dry conditions are intensifying across the nation. For the East Coast, where dry weather warnings are in place, gusty offshore winds will be blowing at times. Advisories are also issued for a large part of South Korea, and they are forecast to be further expanded to inland regions where alerts have not been issued yet. Please continue to take extra precautions against fires. Morning lows will range from -4 to 8 degrees nationwide. Seoul will start off at 3 degrees Celsius. Sunny conditions will dominate for the daytime. Daejeon and Daegu will get up to 18 degrees, and Busan will hit 16 degrees Celsius. The extreme dryness will be alleviated this coming Sunday with nationwide showers in the forecast. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
It's time to wrap things up. Thank you for staying with us.